Hi everyone, this is Anil Wanvari, the founder, chairman, and editor-in-chief of the 25-year-old Indian Television.com group. In our 25th year, we've actually going to be talking to 100 marketers who've made a difference to the world of brands, Indian brands and global brands as well. And I'm delighted to have a fabulous speaker with us today. His name, can you guess what his name is? Well, if you can't, let me reveal him to you. His name is Gunjan, and he's behind a lot of the bubblegum that we eat, a lot of the candies that we eat, and he's been behind a lot of the great advertising that we've been watching on television. Mr. Gunjan Khetan, the CMO of Perfetti Van Melle. Have I got the pronunciation right?
Yeah, Perfetti Van Melle. That's right. Thank you, Anil.
Fantastic. And he's a chief marketing officer who's actually helped build these brands over this. Alpenliebe, who can forget that the advertising when it was launched and the way they've really been promoting themselves is amazing. Center Fresh, if I'm correct, that there's a campaign with the bullock cart which races the woman to the airport. That's an amazing piece of creativity. So I'm very happy to have you here, Gunjan.
No, thank you, Anil, for this warm welcome. You've been very kind with the introduction. I hope I deserve everything that you said, but let's get started. The brand actually sent a fruit, but a lot of people tend to confuse fresh and fruit because they're just so close. They stem from the same place. We have people thinking of fresh as fruit and fruit as fresh. But no, the campaign is doing quite well, and I'm glad that you were able to see it.
Apologies for getting confused again in that front, but like you said, it's they're very close to each other. They
Exactly.
don't they don't come under the same umbrella, do they? Do they come under the umbrella of your brand?
No, no, we treat them as very different brands with very different positioning for different audiences. We try and pull them as apart as possible, but it's going to be a journey. It's not very straightforward.
Fantastic. So let's begin by asking you, talk us through your journey in terms of over the years that you've been in marketing. How have you seen it evolve? What has been your growth like? What have you seen? What changes have you seen? There was a time when we just talked about four P's. Now, how many P's are we talking about?
It's an amazing question, and I always look at my journey as a marketeer from two dimensions. One is what did I learn as a marketeer, right? And clearly, when I graduated in 2003, joined my first company. That was an incredible company called Heinz. I was an assistant brand manager, and we had to do simple things like do a consumer promo, do an advertising campaign, work cross functionally, ensure projects are delivered on time, innovations happen. Because I was working on a brand called Complan, we used to do some doctor detailing as well. So you do these three, four things, and your brand is in a good place to succeed. And when you look at the world today, it's incredibly different, and I believe for a brand manager, it's incredibly difficult as well, because they have to toggle just so many things. There's digital, and within digital, you've got influencers, then various platforms. Consumer and audience awareness is highly fragmented. They're switching from one platform to another. Sometimes they're working on the same multiple platforms at the same time. So for a brand manager, it's just so difficult to kind of stand out in that clutter and say, okay, this is my brand, and would you like to consider it, right? And that's been a remarkable change, and technology obviously has played a big part in it. So I'm very grateful that a large part of my career was built on the simple four P's, as you said, and I was able to deliver results on that. But at the same time, I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to some of these new technologies, some of the markets where these new technologies have evolved, and been able to adapt to these new rules of engagement with consumers quite well. I still remember this was 2013, and I had just gone to South Korea in my first expat assignment. And I was amazed to see that e-commerce in those days was already 10 to 15% contribution, and had to rapidly learn what e-commerce is and how do you start selling your brand on e-commerce. And that was learning at accelerated pace for me, right? So for me, I think in a way it's been challenging, and it's been in a way it's I've been fortunate to be able to get exposed to all these varied changes in the marketing world. So that's one dimension. The other dimension that I always consider is my personal dimension, which is I spent the first 10 years working in India, which I absolutely love. But then I was also fortunate to do a few expat stints. So I went to Korea, then to London, then to US, and every time I was just amazed at how some of the basic insights continue to remain the same, but the cultural nuances, the tonality, the languages make such a big difference. And for a marketer, that's a minefield of gold, right? To be able to learn and adapt your thinking to what the country and the culture needs. So professionally also I've evolved a lot, and I'm grateful to all the companies that I've worked for in the past who've given me that experience. So essentially, professionally and personally, there are two dimensions that I map my career against, and it's been an amazing experience, amazing ride, and I hope it continues for the next 10, 15 years at least.
You're perceived as a marketing thought leader. What is the biggest challenge of being a marketing thought leader?
See, marketing tends to be, it's neither an exact science, not an outright art, right? You can't bucket marketing into any of these things. And that is inherently where the challenge is. There's never the right answer. Okay. And increasingly, CMOs are being put in the spot to explain the return on investment as markets tend to get more outcome focused, as P&Ls are under pressure. Every action has to be therefore justified with an outcome, right? Sometimes some of these things that we do don't have a clear ROI, or ROI is built over a longer period of time. Sometimes it's just equity. Equity doesn't happen overnight. It happens over 5, 10 years of consistent messaging to consumers, right? So as CMOs, I think explaining the ROI of the actions you take is one of the biggest challenge. The other one is some of the best calls I have taken, and I know there are in umpteen number of stories in marketing folklore about how great marketers have taken gut calls, right? And that turned out to be a winner. So it's sometimes very difficult to explain to management what that gut call is and why we should all bet behind that. So eh, to me, these are two inherently difficult challenges to overcome as a marketer. Obviously, then there are challenges that come with times, which is fragmented consumers and disrupted viewership and all that. But to me, those that is part and parcel of my job, right? To navigate some of these challenges. But for me, the bigger one is how do you explain ROI of some of the actions you take, and convince leadership on some of the gut calls you take.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's a classical old example. They still want, I mean, the CEO or the CBO still wants to understand where is my money? Half of my money, advertising money is wasted. I don't know which half. The classical old
Exactly.
film.
Exactly.
So, coming back again in the D2C economy,
Mm.
candies as a segment has not been disrupted as much, and the confectionery market has not been disrupted. Do you see that happening at some stage where disruption will happen in this market?
In ways and shapes, it's already happening. There are a lot of these new players who are coming in on e-commerce and trying to build their brand on e-commerce. See, inherently, there are some platform challenges that, as confectionery industry, we need to overcome. Right? Confection in India sells at largely at rupee one, okay, or 50p, right? None of the e-commerce players or big scale retailers want to do that kind of business, right? And a lot of these products are also impulse, okay, and therefore you cannot craft a pack and build a purpose behind the pack, right? You can just at best try, right? To convince a user to spend 50 to 100 rupees on an e-commerce platform on impulse is always a challenge. Has it not happened? It has happened in a lot of more developed countries. There are only big packs. There are no monos being sold. But India, unfortunately, has evolved in a very different way. And as confection industry, we are working towards ways in which we can upgrade, upscale some of this consumption, give them the right value proposition, right innovation in the right price pack architecture, right? So that's going to happen. It's going to take time. Disruption is already happening. Sometimes we are part of the disruption, and sometimes we are part of the ones being disrupted. It's the standard Darwin's theory. You have to change well enough to survive, right? As a big organization, we have the wherewithals, we have the capabilities, the technical abilities to survive some of this change. And I think e-commerce is going to be big. Will it be as big as say personal care? I don't know. I think we have to reinvent ourselves in a very different way to start winning on e-commerce.
No, I get it. The unit prices are, very, very low. You need to graduate towards larger pack sizes. Uh, it's a bit of a challenge wherein you're going to get consumption habits to change either. Uh,
Exactly.
wherein you possibly, or it could be storage habits. I buy and I store and I eat
Yeah.
when I please. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of education to come on that front. And you said there was some disruption happening. In which areas on e-com is the disruption happening? I may have missed this. I may have skipped this.
Yeah, so a lot of these new age confectionery players are coming up with innovations, with packaging, with price pack architecture that are upwards of 50 to 100 rupees. Some of these brands are built on nostalgia. Okay, the kind of products you and I have grown up eating as a child. So some of these work is already happening. Sometimes we are also getting inspired by some of the work that's happening on e-commerce, and how do we look at our portfolio from a different light, from a different perspective. So there are certain pockets in which it's happening, but it's not happening at scale yet, and that is where we want to come in and do things at scale.
So there is a clear movement in that direction from Perfetti Van Melle. There is a
Yes, yes, we call it the high value pack strategy, and there we try and build the bigger packs, and we put emphasis both in our communication as well as in our go to market on some of these high value packs.
I understand. So, but in terms of your distribution network, how large is it today in terms of, how many points of purchase do you all have? I was going towards a village and I picked up some of your gum uh,
Yeah,
in a village, which was amazing for me. And I picked up some of your bubble gum also. I don't remember whether it was bubble or what do you call that? The bubble gum?
big bubble.
Big bubble, yeah. So I
Yeah.
picked up one of those packs from a village. So your distribution network seems to be pretty much in place. Do you need to penetrate further on the physical side? And on the digital side is another story.
Yeah, so digital side we already covered. I'm sure my sales director would be super happy listening to this. I'm going to grab edit of this call and share it with him that he's been able to place our brands in the smallest of places in India. See, we are one of the best distributed companies in India. If I just go by numbers, as per Nielsen, FMCG is distributed in about 11 million outlets. Food FMCG is in about 8 million outlets. We are in 5 million outlets. Okay, 5 million is huge. Okay,
Absolutely.
fresh and center fruit are close to about 3 million outlets, which is also amazing distribution. Okay, not many brands are fortunate enough to have this kind of distribution. So, from a physical availability perspective, yes, we are well penetrated. From a mental availability or category availability perspective, we are well penetrated. Some of the categories we play in, whether it's chewing gums, whether it's hard-boiled candies, whether it's eclairs, these are upwards of 60% penetration. Okay. The task continues to be penetration in some of the categories. It is consumption in some of the categories, and this is where we were talking about high value packs and how do we drive habit change for consumers, which is going to take time. So depending on what you are, which stage you are in the brand's growth journey, the tasks are significantly different.
Fantastic. Now coming back, you've got You got a very complicated country, regional habits, different taste. Uh, how local are you going? How hyper local are you going in terms of customizing your products?
It's always for an organization like ours, it's always a cost benefit analysis, right? You go very hyper local, you end up compromising scale, and therefore your lines and are not running more efficiently, right? There are just too many changeovers happening. If you are just too mass, you're not engaging the consumers. So we tend to tap into the larger mainstream cultural movements in the country and try and capitalize some of those learnings in our portfolio without getting just too hyper local. Let's make this thing for state A and that thing for state B. That's a bit difficult for us, both from a marketing perspective, from operation perspective, also from a GTM perspective, right? We, for example, picked up a trend of Indians loving tangy, okay, as a flavor. We've all grown up with imli and other such tangy flavors, right? And we have brought it in our lollipop, in our jellies, and these products are doing quite well for us, right? Then there's spicy. We've got products which are in the spicy range. We bring some of the flavors that are popular in India, like mango, into our lollipop franchisee. Similarly, in chewing gum, we try and replicate some of the flavors that are quite popular. So we do tap into some of these cultural understanding, which are a bit more scale, rather than finding something very unique to a particular area.
I'm going to let you into a secret. I use bubble gum whenever I'm traveling long distance. I chew
Hmm.
bubble so I don't fall asleep.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this habit has come across to you at any stage.
No, it's an insight. See, I'll also be honest with you. This is the first time I'm working on in confection as a category, so a lot of learning and unlearning had to be done as I got into it. And I started looking into gums. I realized people are not using gums just for, say, freshness or a change of mood or a change of taste. In some cases, it's a highly functional need of staying awake, not getting bored, just wanting to choose something, sometimes just to keep nausea away. So there's so many incredible uses of chewing gum
And
that
bubble
people
gum.
have figured out.
Bubble
and
gum as
and
well.
bubble gum, yeah, yeah.
So I was
um,
traveling, as I was telling you, I was going to Guhagar, which is on the way to Chiproon, where I picked up the bubble gum. I was
mm,
desperate for it, and I kept on blowing bubbles so that I would stay awake because it's almost a 400-kilometer journey of driving. So it really helped me a lot, and I'm going to be driving there again. Again, I'm going to be consuming a lot of your bubble gum. Coming back again now, it's a challenging world. It's a VUCA world. How do you stay abreast of the latest trends and changes which are taking place in one the field of marketing, the consumer? How do you keep abreast of all this? I mean, of course, you have your studies, you have your reports, you have Nielsen's, you have all of that, but there's so much material and there's so much of day-to-day work. How do you stay sane?
it's a good question. It's something that I dabble with and struggle with as well. I honestly don't force myself into learning too fast and too quick. Okay. I believe when the right opportunity arises, I will find a way to learn about things. Having said that, I'm an avid reader. I tend to read a lot, mostly non-fictional stuff, and I do make it a point to learn about marketing and new ways of marketing. I'm the only social media platform on which I'm relatively more active is LinkedIn. So I tend to follow a lot of people. I read a lot of articles, new perspectives, whether it's marketing or commercial. So that's one big minefield for me to learn new things. I also collaborate a lot with my agencies and use them as springboard for learning. We are in next week, for example, we have working with Wavemaker, who's our media agency, and we are building a platform where multiple other agencies can come and present their ideas on how our brands can collaborate with them. And this would span purely from grassroots level marketing to regular ATL stuff to also technology led marketing. So that becomes my big source of learning. Okay, this is what is happening in the world, and maybe this makes sense for us, right? So I try to use the ecosystem of our agencies, of what I've built myself, to try and learn, but I don't force myself. I try and avoid getting into a FOMO mentality on some of these things.
Right. Gen AI is the buzzword these days. And it's not really a buzzword. It's become a reality in our life. It's not just a buzzword. I
Yeah.
stand, and we're using it for almost everything under the sun. And we're being attacked by bots all the time, thanks to the LLMs hitting our, websites, hitting our publishers, etc. So does it worry you, the world of AI, in terms of if you're using a lot of digital, if you're moving your spends towards digital, whether your money is being spent right, not being spent right?
That's always a perennial question for us. How do we optimize more? And that kind of goes back to the ROI discussion we were having some time back, um, and also the fact that I've I've been forced to be as agile as possible, whether culturally, whether professionally. I don't see Gen AI as a threat, but more of an opportunity to learn, unlearn, and do different things. At the end of the day, we are a confectionery company, so AI tools are not being used by us in the most standard ways. If I was, say, a banking or insurance company, I would use AI tools to interact with consumers, solve their queries, etc. But on confection, we don't. But at the same time, we are using AI to our advantage, whether it's, say, optimizing buying on platforms like Meta and Google, right? Where instead of a manual bidding, can you use AI to bid more frequently and get you the best prices for the best spots, right?
Mhm.
So there's always a scope in marketing for new technology. It's all about trying to find out what is the best overlap and the sweet spot where marketing and technology can come together.
So what's exciting about the major trends and changes which are happening in marketing? What's really keeping you occupied these days?
What keeps me perennially occupied is how do I engage consumers better? Okay. Perfetti as a company is built on really good advertising. So you're always wanting to try and follow the steps of the brave people who walked before me, right? And therefore, on all our brands, what is the best campaign? How do I engage the agency? How do we work together and create something remarkable? At the end of the day, it's an impulse product, and driving impact in small time and small exposure is very, very important in this category. So for me, creative execution is a key point of consideration. The other thing is obviously how quickly digital as the world is changing, and how do we adapt as a company, as a marketing team, to some of these changes in digital world. The third thing is obviously Gen AI, and are there ways in which we can optimize our buying, our marketing spends in by leveraging some of these new tools that have come in the market. So yeah, so these are two, three areas which kind of, I wouldn't say keeps me awake, but always poses a constructive challenge to me and my team on how do we really leverage some of these spaces.
In terms of content, your product categories lend themselves to creating a lot of UGC content, a lot of content. So what are you all doing in that space apart from working with agencies?
We do a lot of content creation because most of our audience, as you were saying, is young audience, Gen Z, and to an extent even Gen Alpha, right? And their habits of content consumption is very different from slightly older audiences. So we do tend to work very closely with influencers and content creators across all our brands, and a substantial part of our marketing budget goes behind engaging with influencers, telling them the story of the brand, and then working with them to ensure they pass on the story in the most engaging way possible to our consumers. We've got some clear KPIs on which we measure performance, because at the end of the day, in companies like ours, on brand like ours, we want to build a scalable model. Okay. without making it to assembly line, right? And that is why working with influencers and building certain guardrails around our content is incredibly important. So yes, short answer. We work very closely with some of these content creators, UGC, across platforms, not just the Metas, or, Instagram and Facebooks of the world, but also going down tier two, tier three rural areas on platforms like ShareChat, Monch, etc.
Yeah, there's a question that I had in my mind, which was addressing while you're working with them, you have a broad sense of brand safety guidelines which you set in
Yes.
place with them. How challenging is it to maintain them?
It is challenging if you're doing something at scale. If I'm working with say 1,000 influencers, it's always going to be challenging. The best we can do is educate them on some of these brand safety guidelines. We have with our agencies and our partners, we have clear check-ins and checks and balances to ensure that whatever is coming through them, that content is relatively brand safe. Um, and see, honestly, we'll make mistakes. Okay, it's part and parcel of a marketer's life. It's just that we try and avoid making mistakes at scale. Okay, and quickly being able to correct the mistake and move on. I won't hold my agency, my partner, or my brand team accountable for a mistake done, as long as we are all clear on how not to repeat the mistake going forward.
I understand. So now, branded content, you all haven't got into that in a bigger way, have you all? At any with any of the, because young, these days a lot of the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute pieces of content are coming out. The ad spot is no longer a 30-second spot or a 10-second spot. It's also a 3-second spot. It's a 5-second spot, 7-second spot. You've got events like the IPL coming up. You have the Champions Trophy tomorrow. So how do you see yourselves engaging with this audience, which is not only consuming entertainment but also sport, as well as different formats, as well as also branded content kind of pieces, which they're looking at consuming, because your brand stand for have a certain character, they have a certain personality. There are many questions in
That's
this one question. Many questions in this one question.
Yeah. No, I think this is a question that I asked myself about 8 months back. Exactly the same question, and I'm glad that you asked this as well on this platform. Um, I think I was also grappling with some of these challenges, more around the branded content piece. On our brands have a certain personality. Okay, if I'm able to merge the personality of the brand with the strengths of a platform and the capabilities of an IP, okay, then there's a possibility I'll create magic for the
Absolutely.
brand, right? And this is where we started working with our agency, and now we are in a happy place where we know this brand, this platform, and this kind of content makes sense. And as I was saying, this week there's a content day that we are working on. This is precisely what we are going to uncover that day, on platform into brand into content. Where does the magic sit, right? So on IP, honestly, you're right. We haven't done much work. Okay, we've done a lot of work on influencers. We've done a lot of work on creating great advertising and shorter edits of that advertising. I firmly believe that there is still a room for long form content. Okay, I think people are going to get increasingly tired of barrage of short form content, and storytelling will come back. Okay, and this is one place where I want to do more work with my team. We've seen how incredibly powerful some of the Thai ads are, because they are able to tell beautiful stories in slightly longer format. Okay, storytelling is never going to go away. Okay, because that is how humanity evolved, right? And while platforms come with certain rules and regulation, but I think long form, and I've talked about it in many other forums. I think there's a space for long form storytelling in our business.
I understand. No, there's the audiences are again getting. We've seen a lot of erosion in terms of television. free-to-air television is growing. Pay television seems to be slightly going down on the in the HSM side, but on the southern side, I believe there's a lot of television is still holding very strong, and on certain regional markets. So, what's your perspective in terms of using these mediums to not only in terms of languages, also in terms of the cultural milieu of the state? What's your perspective on all this?
I think we need to be mindful that India is not homogeneous. Some of the biggest mistakes brand marketers make is they think everything is Hindi belt, right? And a lot of it, fortunately, unfortunately, is echo chamber talk because all of us are just too similar to each other. Okay, and I and one of the things that we in our Perfetti marketing team tend to do is to ensure that we are not talking only to ourselves, and there is a wide variety of views and engagements that we do. So we work very closely with southern channels, southern OTT platforms, influencers from South. Okay, and obviously depending on the brand's strength, some brands are stronger in the north, other brands are stronger in the south. So we do understand the importance of being relevant in the many Indias, and within the Hindi India, also there's Bharat and there's India, right? So we do understand these demographic, this income class, this cultural, these language differences, and we want to use it as an advantage. And that is what we as a marketing team strive for in Perfetti.
I understand. Your brands also were perfect with sport, were fit with sport, especially I
Yeah.
think it's a very good fit with cricket, plus the other sports which are emerging. So where do you see Perfetti as a company, as a confectionery company fitting in terms of we've got a new sports policy coming up, we've got a draft policy, we've got a lot of we've got one mega merger happening where we've got a large platform with many channels, plus we've got a large OTT platform also. So, where do you see Perfetti playing a role in building the culture of sport in this country?
I think it's a very interesting idea. We've in the past been part of sports as recently as 2023, where we were working with the Indian women cricket team captain. Okay, and
Harman.
yeah, Harman and Center Fruit. So it's always there in our radar. And I think as the sports policy evolves in this country, it won't be just about cricket. It would be many other sports that will come. Beyond the physical sport, there's gaming as well, which is an increasingly important part of our of narrative in for marketeers in this country. So we are definitely looking at a lot of these platforms. We just need to find which is the right brand and which is the right sports platform to engage with. But to your point, yes, it is something that we are seriously considering.
Okay, and tell us something about some of the big bang things which you've executed in your life, which you're so pleased about, and which you'd like to share, and what got them to fruition.
Yeah, so there are many. In a 20 plus years of career, there would be many such instances, and I won't bore you guys
We don't
with
get
a lot
bored.
of them.
There's a lot of learning in what you share. There was if there's a case study you can narrate,
Yeah.
which was your most challenging and most fulfilling.
Yeah, so there's one case study that always comes to my mind. From a business impact perspective, it was decent. It was not my biggest success, but somehow as a marketeer and a case study for young marketers, I think it's an incredible story because I learned a lot. This is 2014. I was about 1 year in my South Korea stint, and I was handling a brand called Wheat, which is a depilatory brand. And we were going through some tough time on the brand. It wasn't doing that well. Wheat in South Korea is a highly seasonal brand. It sells at peak only for 3 months during summer, because women use it on their legs, and that's the time that they are more comfortable wearing short dresses, right? So it's a seasonal brand, and obviously you would put in some innovation, some stock in the market, whatever would sell for 3 months would sell, and then everything else would come back, right? So the P&L was never this. one of the things and one of the challenges we had was how do we make the P&L a bit more sustainable, and what is the role that marketing and innovation will play in that. So we went back, looked at a lot of research in the past, and we realized that the biggest when it comes to beauty and keeping hair off you, one of the biggest areas where consumers of Korea focus is underarm. Okay, and we felt that a the opportunity size is huge. B, the right to win for wheat is huge. C, the competitive landscape is not that evolved, right? So when you have got a good mixture, a three green on these three parameters, you realize you are probably playing in a winning space. Okay, so we identified, okay, this is the innovation that we need to do, and we started working on it. So innovation is only one part, but a large part of the success of innovation depends on how do you execute and make people aware of the innovation. So we also went back to consumers to learn a bit more about how do they talk about this problem, and we realized that women today are using razor in the underarm, right? And what it does is it kind of gives you I can't think of the right word, but some kind of a boils kind of effect on your underarm, which Koreans used to call chicken spots. Okay.
Okay.
So we felt that that's a brilliant work that can come back in advertising to demonize the problem, right? And that can become more of a cultural narrative of the problem. So, so we learned that from consumers. We ensure that in our communication, in our script, in our storyboard, we bring that word. We show that underarm with boils on it, and then introduce our product as the savior, right? And then we also realize that a large part of our audience is young kids, okay, teenagers in 9th, 10th, or 12th, or even young college goers. And these kids were not on TV. So Korea had already evolved out of TV for youth about 15 years back. But we also realized from our research that they trust and believe peer recommendations. So what we also did was we said let's do marketing in a very very different way now. We built a band of influencers which we called as wheat stylers. Okay,
Okay.
this is 2013 when influencers were not even big, right?
Yeah.
We trained them for a month with our PR agency, with our R&D teams. Okay, and we ensured that they understand the product, the science, the brand safety guidelines, and then we let them be. Okay, and throughout the summer, all these kids were just posting content around wheat underarm. And by the end of the summer, we had completely transformed the P&L. The brand grew at about 50-60%, hardly any returns. And it was a phenomenal year for the brand. Although the brand was already very small. So therefore, the net impact on the company P&L wasn't strong. But from a marketer's perspective, it is an amazing case of really understanding the consumer, their narrative, their insights, and then bringing some of that in your innovation, in your communication, and more importantly, how you execute in market. So that is
Thank,
always an inspiring story for me.
thank you very much for sharing that. Any other last thoughts? Because I think you've discussed a lot. Unless you want to speak about something that we've not spoken, any other thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
No particular thought as such, but I think for any young marketeer out there listening to this, the only advice I would have is some rules of marketing don't change, even if technology changes. You need to understand your consumer, you need to spend time with the consumer, go after meaningful insights, identify a big enough opportunity that you can monetize profitably without competition. And yeah, and I'm sure you'll be incredibly successful. And my best of wishes to everyone who's listening to this for a great and successful career. And thank you so much, Anil, for giving me this platform to really talk about my experience.
But lovely talking to you. Thank you very much, Gunjan, and all the best to you. And look forward to being in touch.